I was coming back from the best party I had been to in years, and I still couldn't get enough. Even when I left the club, I kept moving my feet to the music. I was well over the drink, so I was feeling pretty dizzy and stumbled around a bit, but I felt fantastic. The club was in a rather unpleasant part of town, but I tried not to think too much about that, and rather just enjoyed the moment and how much fun I had had that night. In the cool night air, my mind began to clear, and for the first time since leaving the club, I became aware of my surroundings. But taking a couple of glances around me, I concluded that there was nothing to worry about. Nothing could happen on such a good night, right? "Hey, kid." I heard to my right and stopped dead in my tracks. I just wanted to keep walking, but I couldn't do that. After all, the stranger sounded friendly, so I turned in his direction, waved, and asked him what he wanted. "Sorry to startle you, my name is Louis." Louis was an interesting guy, clearly much less fortunate than many, based on the ragged old clothes he was wearing and the odd smell emanating from him. It was pretty easy for me to figure out that this was a street person, but I'm not someone who likes to judge people by their living condition or social status. After introducing himself, Louis told me he was very hungry and asked if I could buy him a hamburger at a place down the street where, he informed me, they only cost a few dollars. And then he said, "If you can't, I'll understand. But you can do that. You must know what will make this poor old man very happy, and I'll be very grateful." Actually, he wasn't that old, but that didn't make his plea any less meaningful. He had clearly seen better days, and well, I had some cash left in my pockets. "You know, I'm hungry too, actually, so why don't we both go in and eat? Surely it's better." "No," she interrupted me. His voice sounded loud and sharp. I took a step back and my head hit an old brick wall behind me. For a second I felt backed into a corner, but he immediately apologized and explained that the owners of these places didn't like people like him coming into their place, because apparently they scared the customers away. "Oh, I understand," I said. I took a deep breath, forcing my lips to curl into a smile, and told him it was okay. I would go into the burger joint and place the order for both of us. Then he told me we could sit and eat by the river, which was pretty cool this time of year. "Aren't you cold?" I asked him. He didn't answer, just shrugged his shoulders. I guess he was used to it. It took me a few minutes, but I arrived at the burger joint, and upon entering I noticed that it was pretty empty for the most part, except for a few other night owls who seemed to be quite a bit drunker than I was. As I stood in line to receive my order, I noticed that the server was looking at me in a strange way, but still, she handed me my food with a big smile. She was very pretty, so I guessed that maybe she was used to being harassed by weirdos late at night. I took my order and thanked the girl politely, then went outside and handed Louis his burger. "Here you go," I said. "I'm Louis." That was all he said as he took his burger before telling me about Greg, who he said he wouldn't give a burger to because he was a little toothless. I assumed it was some friend of his who was around. Then he said to me, "Anyway, come on, we might as well sit somewhere than eat standing up. We're horses, aren't we?" Tom. That was a little strange. I mean, I didn't remember telling him my name, but I didn't think anything of it. I was half drunk after all, so maybe I did and didn't remember. Besides, it was clear that Louis had a bit of an odd sense of humor, so I didn't mind. I'd rather see people smile than frown after all. However, just as I took the first bite of my burger, he spoke again. His eyes never left my face as he did so, and that was a little creepy. Then he said, "I saw you have extra money, could you?" "Oh no, sorry mate. In legality, I don't have any more money," I said, interrupting him before he asked me to give him money. Actually, I had my card, but most of the ATMs in the area were blocked at the time, mainly because of the suspicious people wandering around that place at night. Also, as much as it was okay to give some food to a person in need, I knew it was not okay to give them money, because this could only feed whatever addiction I had. "I'm sorry, I don't really have any money to give you," I told him. He was silent for a moment, and then he said, "Well, I actually saw your card when you were paying for the hamburgers," Lewis told me, trying to insist. At this point, I tried to set him straight. "Look, man, I'm a broke student. I was happy to get you something to eat, but I can't give you money." "Are you sure? Just a few dollars would make a big difference to me." "I'm sorry, but I can't." I stood up to leave, as suddenly the pleasant company I had been keeping suddenly turned sour and I no longer felt comfortable. So I told him I had to go home because I had an early math test tomorrow morning. Then he said to me, "But if tomorrow is Sunday, isn't that why you went out partying tonight?" Okay. This was getting weirder and more awkward. I wasn't able to pinpoint why, but I felt like he seemed to know too much about me, and well, I didn't like that at all. I tried to settle the situation and told Lewis that I still needed to go home, so I turned around and went on my way, but then he grabbed my wrist. As fragile as it looked, he had a strong grip. Even so, it was easy enough to push him off and let go. I started to walk away quickly, picking up the pace. Maybe I was wrong, but there was something very sinister about Lewis that made me want to get as far away from that place as I could. Okay. I get the hint, kid, go." He sounded defeated as he said those words. Part of me wanted to stop and somehow explain to him that it wasn't him, that I was just paranoid, but I didn't. Despite the fact that it didn't move from the riverbank as I left, my fingers hesitated over the emergency button on my phone as I walked, just in case. I got to my street pretty quickly after all. I live near the bad parts of town. As I rummaged through my pockets to find the key, I thought, gee, what the hell was that? Zrania, but at that moment I started to hear footsteps. I thought maybe someone else was outside their house at this hour. But something suddenly fell, and when I turned to look, I felt as if the cool night air had suddenly become thicker, heavier. I felt almost suffocated when I realized it was Lewis, standing just a few feet away from me with a large piece of firewood in his hands. "I really just wanted some cash, boy. I don't want to hurt you, but I have bills to pay. Why don't you be a good boy and help old Lewis pay his bills?" he said to me in an almost pitiful tone. "I'm going to call the police," I said, showing him the phone so he could see I was serious, but to my surprise, Lewis was much quicker than I thought he would be, for in the blink of an eye he was standing in front of me, his smile almost toothless. This made me shudder. There was something strange about the way he was looking at me. Maybe I should have given him the money earlier, but I didn't want to. It just didn't feel right to do so. "Lewis, please leave me alone. I have nothing to give you. Don't complicate things, please," I said, trying to talk some sense into him and just leave me alone. "I know you have money, kid. I know a lot more about you than you think." I don't know if he was telling the truth or just he was trying to get in my head. At this point, I wasn't sure of anything anymore. But what I did know is that I should have watched my back as I walked home, and that I should have also done it as I opened the door to my building, because the back was a big mistake. I woke up on the floor a few hours later, shivering with cold. It was almost dawn and Lewis was nowhere in sight. I woke up groggy and with a bad headache. Then I remembered what had happened last night and started to touch my head looking for some kind of wound, but I had nothing, just a lot of pain. I put my hands in my pockets looking for my wallet and keys, and to my surprise, all my belongings were with me, including my card and some dollars. I was very puzzled, but after checking my cards and doing my math, I realized that he had indeed taken some of my money, but he was considerate enough to leave me a few dollars in cash and the rest of the money in the bank. This happened a few months ago, and I still think about it today and wonder if maybe I should have been nicer to him, or if I should have just given him some money. then I wouldn't be feeling this constant feeling that someone is behind me, ready to attack me the second I let my guard down. Living on the streets is a living nightmare in itself. What could be worse than being hungry and cold, night after night, feeling your stomach devour itself, while the elements beat down on your exposed skin through your tattered clothes? It's easy to judge from a comfortable position, which is why, despite what happened tonight, I don't hold a grudge against Lewis. I know that may sound stupid considering he attacked me with a stick, but it makes me think about it that he could have taken all my money, and yet he only took a little. Maybe he did have something important to pay for with that money. Maybe he did have a great urgency for it. Anyway, this is something I will never know, as one day I happened to run into the girl from the hamburger store as I was riding the bus to the university. She sat in that seat next to me, and to my surprise, she recognized me from the other night. We made small talk and I asked her about Lewis. Then she told me he had passed away that winter. Unfortunately, he was found frozen to death in the little shelter I had set up in the alley where he slept. Upon learning this, I couldn't help but feel sorry for him. But sadly, this is something that is far more prevalent than it seems. Hundreds of homeless people lose their lives every year in this country, either to the elements or to the danger of the streets. Either way, I really hope that wherever he is, it's a better place than this. My name is Sarah, and at the beginning of last winter, a series of economic problems led me to be left without a roof over my head. The first few days in that situation were the hardest I have ever gone through in my life, but I still managed to live in those conditions for a while, managing to get some food and a place to sleep, until another much bigger problem arose. The cold of winter was beginning to set in. Temperatures were dropping fast, and I barely had a sweater to keep me warm. It was during one of those difficult days that I met Nastya, a young homeless woman like me. She helped me as much as she could and taught me a few things, but still the cold was slowly killing me. One afternoon, some policemen saw me and said there was a homeless shelter nearby. I didn't have to think much about it. I decided I would go there because anything was better than living outside in the freezing cold of winter. I told Nastya and suggested that we go together, but she thought otherwise. She told me not to go there because I was better off here. "We will freeze to death, Nastya," I told her, but she insisted that I was better off on the streets than in that place, but she never explained why. I told her, "It's okay, if you don't want to go, but I'll do it regardless." The next day I went to the shelter, and to my surprise the place looked nice from the outside, which was more than I expected. There I was kindly greeted by a man named Henry, who was one of the people in charge of the shelter. "What is your name, miss?" "Sarah," I said. "Nice to meet you, Sarah." "Nice to meet you, Henry." The man seemed very nice, but after that comment he looked me up and down in detail. At the time, the attitude of seemed strange to me, but when he led me to what would be my bed, I completely forgot about it. The place was a clean and spacious room in which there were several beds, but there was no. "You are lucky to have a room where you will be alone for the time being. Enjoy it," he said, walking out of the room and leaving me in my new temporary home. I was so pleased by Henry's kindness that I was convinced I had misunderstood his strange attitude. The man was pleasant and polite, which also showed in his neat and well-groomed appearance, in his large dark eyes and kind smile. You could also see that he was a good person, and those dark circles under his eyes only indicated that he was a hard-working man. The next few days I spent at the shelter were fantastic. I had food, water, a comfortable bed, was protected from the cold, and was treated well. Besides Henry coming up to me from time to time to see how I was doing, I even had the opportunity to meet and talk to other homeless people, which made me feel understood and supported. But the more I talked to them, the more I realized that something strange was going on there. Many of them were complaining about how dirty the shelter was, how crowded they were in the rooms, the rats and insects that walked near them, and how they were being treated by the caretakers. I didn't understand. That was not my situation in that place at all. At that very moment, I saw Henry looking at me from afar, which scared me. Then I began to wonder, what's going on? Why am I getting special treatment? I didn't have an answer to these questions, but at least they helped me to be more alert. That's how I realized that throughout the day, Henry was following me and keeping his eyes on me all the time. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but then I was sure it was not. Every time I moved out of his field of vision, within minutes, he was close enough to keep an eye on me again. Most days it happened that at some point he would approach me, and this day was no exception. I tried to make the fear inside me not show and tried my best to relax, but I've never been good at dissembling, so it wasn't certain that I would succeed. "Are you okay, Sarah? You look a little nervous." I tried to act as natural as possible, but I could see something different in her big dark eyes. They seemed expressionless, without that kindness they had shown at first. I replied that I was fine, and he quickly evaded it. Something about him definitely felt different, and the truth is that my sixth sense was telling me that I should watch out for him. It was then that I decided that I would leave the next morning. When it was time for bed, I went to my room trying to trick Henry into taking his eyes off me. Apparently it worked, because there was no sign of him when I entered the room and closed the door. Since I felt threatened, I placed one of the beds in front of the door to prevent anyone from entering, and despite being as protected as possible, I forced myself not to sleep. At least for this last night, I would be in the shelter. The next few hours passed with no sign of anyone wanting to enter, so I inevitably let my guard down and fell asleep. This was a very stupid oversight. Did you really think you would escape? I didn't even have enough time to fully wake up and react, because a few seconds after he had spoken, I was hit in the head and passed out. My hands were tied, my eyes were blindfolded, and I had a gag in my mouth when I regained consciousness. There was also a strange smell, like leather. Then I realized that it seemed to be in a moving car. Then I started to hear a conversation between two men. I can't believe it. This slut was trying to escape. Yes, Thania was very upset. She didn't want to do this all of a sudden. You know, she likes to prepare everything very well. Of course I know Thania well. I know. I just hope this girl is as good as you think she is. I panicked after hearing the conversation between the men. I recognized one of them by the voice. It was Henry, and because of the movement around me, it was certain he was in a car, but I had no idea where they were taking me or what for. Worst of all, however, was that I could do nothing to defend myself or escape. After a while, the vehicle stopped. "Hey, little cockroach, wake up." This was Henry's voice, and then one of the two grabbed my arm and pulled me up hard. It was still very cold outside, and I couldn't see anything because of the blindfold on my eyes. They led me to some kind of building. I could tell by the echo of their voices bouncing off the walls, and because we had to climb many steps. Then I heard a door open, and then close behind us. This was like some kind of living room, as I could hear a group of people talking around me. At that point, I could make out at least 5 or 6 voices, between male and female. "Henry and Jonathan, I hope it's worth bringing us all here at this hour," a female voice said. "It's definitely worth it," Henry said. A second later, they removed my blindfold, and when they did, I could see a large group of people. Each of them looked well-dressed and groomed, but what they had most in common was the way they were looking at me. It was as if they all desired me in a sick way. These people were looking at me as if they were hungry, as if they wanted to devour me. I felt shivers. "Looks perfect to me, guys. Good job," said the same woman who spoke a moment ago and who must have noticed the fear on my face, because she soon looked at me with a sort of mixture of concern and condescension and said, "Oh, honey, don't be afraid. We're not going to do anything inappropriate to you. You see, Sarah, today you will just be our food. You must taste very good, honey, too good." I froze, paralyzed. This couldn't be true. Did this group of sick people really plan to eat me? "Don't worry, we'll enjoy you very much," the woman said with a half smile and a mischievous wink. Then she ordered Henry and the other guy to take me to a room and warned them to take good care of me. At that moment, I knew I had to escape at any cost. I definitely would not let this pile of psychos eat me. So I started thinking about how to do it, and I found the answer in those same people. They looked very decent and had treated me with care, so I was sure that what they wanted was good food, no damage or dirt. That's why they had given me such special treatment at the shelter. Maybe my only chance was to stop looking so perfect. This became even clearer to me as Henry led me down the hallway to the room. He said, "You know, Sarah, your type, young, pretty, and healthy, are the ones that taste the best. That's why I chose you. Don't take it personally. It's just business." As we walked, I put my hands on my stomach and leaned over a little and made a loud ouching sound. Henry leaned over, wondering what was wrong with me, and when he did, I hit his face with my head, feeling his septum crack. As he writhed in pain, I kicked him very hard, pushing him into the room where he was supposed to take me, and closed the door. I knew this wouldn't stop him for long, but it would give me time to escape. I immediately ran for the stairs. Then I realized that it was not an apartment building, but some kind of mansion. I ran down the stairs as fast as I could until I finally reached the front door. I pulled the handle and fortunately it was open, so I kept running at full speed until I reached a busy street and started calling for help. Fortunately, a family in a pickup truck stopped when they saw me running with my hands tied. I didn't tell them exactly what had happened to me, only that a group of psychopaths had kidnapped me and I had successfully escaped. They took me to the police station, and it was there that I was finally able to tell the whole story. Fortunately, the officers referred me to other shelters that were in another part of the city. There I was treated very well, and I was able to stay there for the rest of the winter. I never knew if Henry and the others were caught, but I never heard from him again, nor from any of the other members of that group of cannibals. What I did learn from the police was that there was no Henry in charge of the shelter I was in. Tell me something, how do you feel when you walk alone at night? Are you overly cautious? Do you walk in fear, looking back every few seconds, thinking that something is going to happen to you at any moment? Or are you one of those people who feel very safe and think that dangerous things only happen to the few people in the news? If you are of the latter group, I introduced myself. My name is Jamie, and I used to be one of those people too. I'll start by saying I'm a big guy. I'm an instructor at a gym and I'm 6 feet 4 inches. I mean, I'm the kind of guy you wouldn't want to fight. And being aware of this, in a way, always gave me some kind of security. But that night, none of that mattered. That night I realized that no matter who you are, if you look for misfortune, misfortune will come for you. I used to work at night in a small gym located in the center of the city. When it was time to go home, I had to run to the station to catch the last train, because if I didn't catch it, I had to walk several blocks in the dark to get home. To be honest, I chose the schedule because I was getting paid more for the night hours. I never thought I would be in danger just walking home from work at night, and in any case, I was fit and a very good runner. And that was the first thing I did the night it all happened. I ran, but it was no use. It was Wednesday night, a day known for being the laziest and most boring day of the whole week. But this Wednesday was special, as the next day there would be an important bodybuilding event in town. So the gym was packed until almost midnight, and to make matters worse, I was the one who had to make sure everything was in order and close. When it was finally time to close the gym, my 3 other colleagues and I went our separate ways. Everyone had a car except me, but since we lived so far away from each other, no one could give me a ride. I knew I probably wouldn't catch the train, but I still thought I might get lucky. So I hurried and ran to try to catch it. When I got to the station, I noticed that the ticket seller was no longer there, which didn't surprise me. Hardly anyone pays for a train ticket at this hour, as the tickets are open after midnight. Shaken and exhausted from the marathon from work to the station, I checked the electronic signs to see when the train would arrive, but as usual, they were not working either, so I could only wait on the platform and see if the train would show up in the next few minutes. I sat illuminated by the dim light of the new moon, and as I waited for the train, I didn't think it likely that any other passengers would arrive at the station at that hour. I looked across the station, just to confirm that no one was coming, but to my surprise, I saw in the shadows a silhouette in the distance, another person coming towards where I was. I remember thinking that maybe the train was just delayed, but with each step the other person took, I began to notice something strange. I admit I couldn't see very far without my glasses, but there was something about the silhouette that didn't fit, and when the silhouette finally came into view and I could see what was in front of me clearly, I swear my blood froze. This was not a man like me coming home from work. This man had some sort of bandage made of shreds of cloth around his head. The makeshift bandage was very dirty and had 3 holes where his eyes and mouth were. He was also wearing torn and dirty pants and a ratty old sweater just as dirty as everything else he was wearing. He was homeless. I felt nervous right away, as that man looked like some kind of living, ragged mummy. And when I analyzed him better, I noticed something else. Maybe this was what I should have seen from the beginning. Even though I was only 3 meters away, the man was not walking in the direction of the end of the train station. He was walking in the direction of me. At that moment, I thought for sure I was paranoid, that this could be nothing more than a coincidence. But I didn't want to take any chances, so I grabbed my backpack from the seat and headed towards the other exit of the train. Even though it would take longer, I had decided it was better to take the bus. Once I left the train station, I walked fast in the direction of the park since the bus stop was only a block away. I walked as fast as I could, but without running, because if that man was behind me, he would know I was running away from him. So I turned around, praying not to find him, praying that he was just a crazy homeless man waiting for the train. But to my terror, that was not the case. He was not only still walking behind me, but the man with the bandaged head had closed the gap. As soon as my gaze fell on him, the man changed his stance and started running towards me. He was slow, but very menacing. Each step he took felt steadier than the last, full of determination, and heading towards me. There was no point pretending I wasn't terrified, so I started running too. I ran as fast as I could to the bus station. It was my lucky day. The bus usually took a long time, but this time it was close. Wasting no time, I made one last dash and daringly crossed the street until I reached the bus stop. I was going so fast that when I tried to stop, I almost fell flat on my face from the momentum I was carrying, so the bus almost ran me over. Luckily, the driver had slowed down and was able to brake in time. The doors had opened, and then the driver said to me, "Hey, are you crazy, brother? I almost ran you over with the bus." "I'm sorry. It's just that there was a man chasing me," I said, trying to apologize for almost causing an accident. He didn't give my explanation much thought and said, "Yeah, whatever. Just pay the fare and get on the bus." I reached into my pocket for my wallet, but it was gone. I checked all my pockets in my backpack and my wallet was gone. This has to be a joke, I thought. Dying of embarrassment, I said to the driver, "Hey buddy, I can't find my wallet. It's an emergency. I must have lost it in the chase. Would it be possible for me to go without paying?" The man looked me up and down before sarcastically telling me, "Oh yeah, right. That's my job, you know, to give people a free ride. Get off the bus." I insisted a couple of times that he let me ride. I even told him that I would come the next day and pay him double the fare, but the man was relentless and asked me to get off the bus. I looked both sides to see if I saw the mummy man, but he was not there. So without any other alternative, I got off the bus. As the driver was quite furious at this point, I honestly did not want any problems with anyone. As soon as the bus left, I was alone once again. Or so I thought, until I looked across the street and saw once again that terrifying man with the bandaged face. I was completely paralyzed at the sight of him. At that moment, I felt unable to escape. The street was quite narrow, and the man was now only a couple of meters away from me, slowly approaching. I was standing against the wall, and when we came face to face, I thought, okay, this is the part where he pulls out a knife and stabs me, or takes off his blindfold and turns out to be monster, and I honestly got ready to fight whatever it was. But instead of doing either of the things I mentioned, he reached out his hand trying to give me something, then spoke for the first time and said, "Hey, this is your wallet, you dropped it at the train stop." I looked down, and it was true, it was my wallet, and I could see that I still had money in it. Was this the reason the man was after me? "Oh, thank you very much," I said. But once I reached out to grab my wallet, the man grabbed my arm, and with his other hand he started to remove the dirty bandage that covered his whole head, and as he did so, his face was very close to mine, as if making sure I was looking at him. I was completely petrified. I really didn't know what to do but look at him, and when he finally removed the bandage, I felt the air get stuck in my lungs. This man's face was completely disfigured, but not only his face but also his scalp and a large part of his neck and chest were covered with scars, as if he had been the victim of a great fire. While I remained mute and motionless, and with my eyes wide open due to the shock, I suddenly felt something cold brushing against my neck, and I only had to look down a little to realize that the man was holding a knife to my neck. When I realized this, my heart began to pound. We were silent for a moment, waiting for him to tell me to give him back my wallet or something like that. But what he said was something very different. "You know, when I was your age, I used to be just as good looking as you." People looked at me with sympathy. I was very lucky with girls, and life smiled at me every day. But all that went down the drain one early morning when I drunkenly walked out of a bar and crashed my car into a tree, causing a huge fire and narrowly surviving. You know, boy, when I woke up in the hospital, I was happy to be alive for a few days, until, for the first time, after several months in recovery, I could see myself in a mirror. That day I wished I had died in the accident. Most people think that surviving something like that is having a new chance, and they always tend to say it's a miracle. You want someone special and blah blah blah. But that's not true, or not for everyone. Because from the very moment I left the hospital bed, my life went to hell. And since then, every day I wake up debating between taking my life or enduring one more day. Because the worst thing is not living in the streets. The worst thing is the prejudice of people, is that they close the doors because of your appearance, is that you cannot find a job, is that it is impossible to find a partner. In short, is not having a reason that drives you to get out of the hole. And even when you want to do a good deed with someone, these people are not able to see in you more than a monster just because of how you look. If I wanted to, right now I would cut your face with this razor, and tomorrow when you wake up with a completely disfigured face, knowing that you will never see the same person in the mirror again, but a monster, Then you would put yourself in my shoes and you would know exactly what I am talking about. Hearing this last, my heart went frantic and a shiver ran through me from head to toe. But then he continued, "However, I will do no such thing, because despite all the trash people have been to me, I am still a better person than all of you." Followed by these words, he removed the knife from my neck and also the arm he had put to the side of me, preventing me from escaping. He then handed me my wallet and said, "You're welcome. Now beat it, kid." He turned his back on me and walked away. On the way home, I could do nothing but repeat in my mind his words, and although I still felt a little scared by that strange encounter, I really felt sorry for him. I put myself in his shoes and I could not, if I want to imagine how it would have been that moment when he looked at himself in the mirror for the first time and realized that he would never again be who he was, and that from now on that would be his new reality. After that, I never saw him again, even though I ride the train every day. But this is certainly an experience I will never forget. My life is that of an ordinary man. I work in a boring office, complete my hours as quietly as I can, and then go home, always on the same train and the same route. Every day I buy a sweet on the way, and then I arrive home tired, getting ready to repeat the same routine the next day. The truth is that I have no great aspirations in life, just to see my children grow up and live as relaxed as possible, without bothering anyone. For as long as I can remember, it has always been this way, and no matter what I have lived through, none of us have changed. Still, people question my lifestyle. They tell me things like, I will never know what it's like to really enjoy life, that I am doomed to a boring and irrelevant life, that I don't know happiness, and blah blah blah. People around me really believe that nothing interesting has ever happened to me. I honestly wish they were right, but unfortunately they are wrong. This happened to me one warm summer afternoon just last year. That day I left my house on the usual schedule, and it seemed like it was going to be another routine day. I took the train home, and by the time I left the station it was dark as usual. I walked home, and although it was 15 blocks, the time passed rather quickly, perhaps because I enjoyed some fresh air after being at work all day. Up until then, everything seemed normal. Until about 10 blocks from my house, I noticed a man walking half a block behind me. Normally, this wouldn't get my attention. I mean, everyone has the right to walk. But there was something about this man that I didn't like at all, and that is that his gaze was on me as if frozen. I was trying not to turn around so it wouldn't be too obvious that I was looking at him, but I couldn't help it. The man was homeless. I could tell by the clothes he was wearing. His pace was getting faster and faster as we got closer and closer to my house. That afternoon, the streets were completely empty. It seemed like they were made just for the two of us. Although I was trying not to get any ideas, the truth is that the close and strange presence of this person was making me more and more uncomfortable and uneasy. After walking 2 blocks and seeing that he was still following me, I decided to speed up my pace and started to walk very fast, almost running down the street. Then I took advantage of a passing car to turn around with the excuse to look at it and check if the guy was still following me. So I did, and when I looked back, I was really terrified. So I did, and when I looked back, I was really terrified. Not only had I not lost the man, but now he was even closer than before. When I realized this, my first impulse was to run as fast as I could, but it would be too obvious. So I decided to keep walking, turning at every corner to throw him off, and when I reached the first curve, I accelerated my pace, while the man lost sight of me. A few seconds later, he was already turning in my direction. At that point, we were getting closer and closer to my house, and I wasn't going to let this man know where I lived. So I stayed there hiding, leaning against the wall, and with a bottle I took out of the trash can a meter away from me, clutched in my hand. I was just waiting for the man to pass me, and if he tried anything, he would get a good bottle to the head. Indeed, the man approached and passed right by me. At that moment, I noticed a certain hesitation in his walk. If he wanted to do something to me, I knew he had missed his chance or had simply changed his mind. I remained leaning against the wall until the man turned again and continued walking, now at a more leisurely pace. When I finally lost sight of him, I went back to my house, taking another route, still expecting to meet this person, but this did not happen. When I got home, everything went on like a normal day. My wife went out early, so she decided to make dinner by herself, which suited me fine as I was particularly stressed. That night I decided not to tell them about my incident with the homeless man, as it would only worry my family. As night fell, I fell into bed devastated, and as quickly as I put my head on the pillow, I fell completely asleep. I'm a pretty deep sleeper, so once I fall asleep, I don't open an eye again until the next morning. The next time I opened my eyes, I didn't have time to look at the time or try to continue sleeping, as I had a cold metal resting on my neck. "You move an inch, and I'll slit your throat like a fish." That raspy voice was from no one I knew. My eyes were still trying to adjust, and I couldn't make out the person in front of me. "Who or what are you?" I asked him, still dazed and scared, in a sleepy voice. He didn't answer, but it took a few seconds to awaken my senses and come back completely from the dream world. It was then that I realized what was happening and remembered that face. That was the homeless man who had followed me a few blocks before arriving at my house. He probably followed me from behind without me seeing him and finally saw where my house was. I opened my eyes wide as I completely fell into the situation and froze, trying to stop this man from reacting badly and stabbing me with the rusty knife that was caressing my throat. At that moment, he said, "Now you're going to get up very slowly with me and give me all your money," he said in a low voice, while his putrid breath almost made me vomit. His voice was trying to convey confidence, but he was clearly very upset. Those eyes were not normal. It was clear that he had consumed some kind of substance before coming here. This man was dangerous. Any false move and I could end up dead. So while my wife was still sleeping peacefully, having no idea what was going on around her at that moment, the man slowly walked me to where we kept the money, which was a box in the closet, but in reality I had no money hidden. I just needed to make time for my wife, who had just seen out of the corner of my eye, who was not really asleep, to finish taking the revolver out from under the bed. "Hey, woman, don't believe me, you idiot. I know you're awake, so stay still because I'm watching you. One false move and not only will you be without a husband, but I'll be paying your kids a visit," said the bastard. At that point, I stood perfectly still and asked him to please not hurt my wife or my children, and told him I would give him anything he wanted. While the guy was distracted listening to my voice, my wife took out the gun and tried to shoot, but due to nerves, she forgot to remove the safety, so the gun didn't work. But at least it served as a distraction, and taking advantage of the situation, I pushed the man and ran in the direction of my children. But he stopped me by sticking the knife in my calf and then began to hit me savagely in the face. Several of my teeth started flying out as the man continued to hit me. My wife was witnessing the whole thing, but she couldn't shoot because she could have hurt me too. But at one point she decided to shoot near him, to scare him and get him to let go of me. This somehow worked and managed to scare him, stopping his blows on me, which if they continued for a few more seconds would kill me. The man ran out into the other room, but when we chased after him, me injured and my wife in shock, we saw the homeless man standing in front of the stairs, knife in hand, pointing at our daughter Sabrina's neck. "You shouldn't have done that, you stupid assholes. You shouldn't have provoked me. I was just going to take the money and leave. Calm down. Let my daughter go. This is not going to end well for you if you don't," I told him with the little strength I had left, but with the firm conviction that I would not allow this wretch to hurt my little girl or any of my children. Think about it. If you hurt him, you won't be able to protect yourself, and I assure you I will kill you. My threat was serious, but I was also scared to death at the mere thought that he might carry out his threat on my daughter. The homeless man looked at me with those wild eyes he had and said, "I don't care what you do, I have nothing to lose if you kill me. This little girl will go with me, and it's only because of you." As he said that, he stroked our daughter's head, something my wife could not stand. Then he raised the gun very quickly and tried to shoot her in the head, but the bullet missed. However, in a state of shock, the man fell down the stairs. Seeing this, my wife ran out with the gun still in her hand, while I collapsed to the floor from my wounds, feeling myself fading away. But even so, I crawled through the pain to the stairs, summoning superhuman strength just so I could get there and find out if my daughter and wife were okay. But before I got there, I heard another shot, which deafened me completely. I could hear nothing but a beeping sound. In the same way, I managed to get conscious to the edge of the stairs, and there I could see my wife crying next to my daughter, who was also crying with a dislocated arm. My other two little ones, Edgard and Frank, came running down the hallway, and upon seeing me lying on the floor and covered in blood, they began to cry as well. And while I tried to calm them down by telling them that I was fine and that it was just a scratch, I peeked back downstairs, and it was then that I saw that a few feet away from where my wife and daughter were lying, the man's body was lying with a pool of blood around his head. That same night, we called the police. They removed the body of the homeless man, while my daughter and I were taken to the hospital in an ambulance. My husband and I gave statements to the authorities about what had happened. However, it did not take long for them to declare that it was all self-defense. A week later, both my little girl and I were completely recovered, although the psychological sequels lasted a little longer. After that, I kept doing the same routine and going back the same way every day. But something had changed. From now on, I look around obsessively, and I'm much more trained, since I took self-defense classes and also shooting. It was hard to get out of the routine to add a couple of new activities to my life. But every time I think about that night, I feel I have to do it, because the only thing that made that pool of blood belong to the homeless man and not my daughter was that her mother knew how to use a gun. The streets of New York have always had a particular and unique vibe in the world. The Big Apple, the city that never sleeps, a metropolis with a multitude of rushing pedestrians, lights everywhere and towering skyscrapers. In short, it is not for nothing that New York is considered by many as the capital of the world. However, behind the garish glow of the canopies, there are people who walk in the shadows. People who wander the streets unseen, unnoticed. Gary was one of those shadows. He had been homeless for more than a decade and managed to survive on the fringes of society. But that wasn't always the case. Gary once had a life that was now a distant memory, a decent job, a modest apartment, and a family. But life has its own way of executing its plans, and little by little, he found himself on the streets, moving from shelter to shelter and relying on the kindness of strangers to survive a cold. One October night, Gary found himself wandering through an unfamiliar part of the city after being kicked out of his usual place to sleep by a new security guard, and now he needed to find another place to spend the night. As he walked, he noticed an alley that seemed unusually quiet and secluded, a rare find in a city that never sleeps. The alley was flanked by old, abandoned buildings that seemed to whisper stories of the past. Gary ventured further into the old alley, his breath visible in the cool night air, when he could see in the distance and a small door partially hidden by a pile of old and disused dumpsters. The door was ajar, and he was curious, but not only that, but several of the surrounding buildings, including the one where the door was seemed to be mostly unoccupied. So he thought maybe this would be a good way to get shelter for that cold night. Gary approached the door, and before entering looked around to see if anyone was watching him. But beyond the nighttime noise of the city, he saw and heard no one, so he ventured inside. The interior was completely dark except for the faint glow of streetlight filtering through the door. He fumbled around for a moment before finding a small flashlight in his pocket, a souvenir he had brought with him from the last shelter he had been in. Clicking on it, in the beam of light revealed a dusty, decrepit room, filled with old furniture covered in white sheets. It looked like the place had been abandoned for years. Harry's eyes caught sight of a staircase leading to what appeared to be a basement, and hopefully thinking that perhaps he could find a warmer, more hidden place to spend the night, he descended the stairs. The air grew heavier and heavier as he descended. When he finally reached the bottom, he found himself in a long, narrow hallway, lined with doors on both sides. Each door had a small, rusty license plate. The strangeness of the place made him nod, but Gary was tired and desperate for a place to sleep and not have to spend the freezing night on the street. So he picked a door at random, number 13 in this case, since it was the one in front of him, pushed it, and peeked in. The first thing he noticed was that the room inside was small and almost empty, with only a tattered mattress on the floor. At another time in his life, that would have seemed rather miserable, but that day, that simple old broken mattress on the floor was paradise compared to the cold, hard concrete of the street. So he sighed in relief, dropped his backpack and sat down on the mattress as he lay there, trying to ignore the strange noise echoing down the hallway. He felt an uneasy feeling come over him. It wasn't just the cold or the darkness. There was something else, something wrong. Gary's eyelids became heavy, and despite his uneasiness, he fell into a deep sleep. However, it was not a pleasant sleep, but rather a restless one. In his dreams, he saw shadows moving around him, whispering his name. He dreamt of the number 13 doors slamming shut and ghoulish laughter echoing, chilling his blood. He awoke with a start, his heart pounding loudly in his chest. The room was completely dark. His flashlight had moved away somewhere he couldn't reach it. He could hear faint footsteps outside the room, and at that moment his breathing became short. He strained to hear more, but the footsteps stopped just outside his door, and for a moment there was complete silence. Then a slow creak as the door to his room began to open. Panic seized Gary and he rushed to find his flashlight. The door opened all the way, revealing nothing but darkness beyond it. Harry's fingers finally closed around the flashlight and he switched it on, directing the light towards the door. The light from his flashlight illuminated the hallway, but there was no one there. The footsteps had stopped and the silence was deafening, but mustering all his courage, he got up and entered the hallway with the flashlight trembling in his hand. He looked both ways but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Just the same empty, eerie hallway. He looked and debated whether to go back to the room, but realized he would rather spend the night on the street than face whatever was going to visit him that night. So he left that place as fast as he could, closing the door behind him. Gary never went back to that part of town. He had heard stories from other homeless people about strange disappearances and haunted places, but he never believed them until that night. Gary learned that some doors are better left unopened, and other places are better left unexplored. In a city full of shadows, some shadows are better left in the dark,